Hi again. Thank you for being here. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. As you've already heard in this letter, in this Gosho, Nichiren spends some time justifying or pointing out, justifying isn't the right word, pointing out his relative position in the scholarship of Buddhism, and certainly within the context of Japan historically and contemporaneously. Now, I think in this part, we're going to start he's going to shift a little bit toward the nature of, we've already read that, itch. The teachings, the latter day of the law, will be a period of decline. And so we've already had examples of the loss of the teachings, right? Because the teachings are eroded and turned into traditions and habits born of commentaries that don't hit the mark. They take you away from the words of Shakyamuni Buddha and become the words of other men. And we're cautioned, Buddha himself, don't follow other men, other persons, follow the law. So it's an interesting component of what we call the teachings. And it's important to understand every time we see that word, the teachings, that we, as I've said before, are our own teachers. The nature of authoritarianship, which begins with us individuals. This, call it laziness, call it a responsibility issue, label it any way you will, but there is this tendency in humans to, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but we kind of like it when somebody else tells us what to do. And there's different reasons for that, but let's just recognize that human beings have a nature that says, I would rather somebody told me what to do than figure it out myself. And that in Buddhism is a very dangerous tendency, because what it allows us to do is, on the one hand, if somebody comes along and says, if you study and read this, this will be obvious, but I'm telling you, it's really this. And so that person, you automatically have an affinity toward letting them be the authority. And now you've shifted from teaching yourself from the actual words of Shakyamuni and the translations by qualified bodhisattvas who have stuck to the strict interpretation of the teachings, and you've now shifted to a person who may not be staying true to the strict interpretation of the teachings, because ultimately we are our own teachers. So if we use a source that isn't authentic, then we are teaching ourselves that same inauthentic thing. You follow? And this is how things become tradition and keep leading away from the mark. And it's hard to know this if you're just a casual student. But as also Shakyamuni said, if you study broadly, then your teaching will be corrected because you will be seeing the teaching clearly. Just don't rely on this authoritarian habit. It's not a good idea. Even my words, as I'm talking to you, and I'm trying my best from my 40 or more years of practice and study to stay true to the teachings, the words, even though we're not supposed to be attached to the words. If we all read as many as possible, then our teaching will come through our experience of life, and our path will foment from that. Follow? So I'm just part of the Sangha, right? So collectively, we correct our teachings. And this is what Nichiren does, by example. So he talks a lot about that in this letter, in this Gosho. And now he's going to spend a little bit more time using examples from sutras and commentaries and stories to indicate the importance of staying true to your study of the teachings and not relying on our human habit of sloughing off that responsibility to somebody else to tell us what to do. So let's get into it, and you'll see, I think, what I'm trying to say. And I apologize if I'm a little bit low energy. Usually doing this picks me up. I feel more energy right now, but I'm still I'm dealing with some health things, and so if you detect that I'm dragging a little bit, I apologize. I am. Therefore, the third cup of coffee. Here we go. Question. But if there's no wise person who understands why these calamities have arisen, then how can proper steps be taken to deal with them? If one does not understand the origin of an illness, though one may try to treat the sick person, the treatment will surely fail, and the patient will die. Now, if the people resort to meditations, prayers, without understanding the basic cause of these disasters, can there be any doubt that the nation will in time face ruin? How dreadful to think of it. So he's saying if people in their practice are practicing incorrectly because they don't understand the true nature of the teaching and how it brings about certain consequences in the environment, then all their prayers, meditations, concentrations, their insights will be off the mark. So the answer. They say that snakes know 7 days in advance when a heavy rain is going to occur, and that crows know that lucky or unlucky events are going to take place in the course of a whole year. This must be because snakes are followers of the great dragons who make the rains fall, and crows have for a long time studied such matters of divinity. Now I am only an ordinary person, and therefore have no understanding of the cause of these disasters. Nevertheless, I believe I can generally instruct you concerning this matter. These are from Asian lore, of course. We could use the example in the West of if you've ever lived in an earthquake zone, as I lived in California for quite a long time, and there are many earthquake zones throughout North America. I'm sure you've heard, and I've experienced firsthand, dogs, cats, dogs will howl, and you'll go outside and tell your dog to shush, be quiet, and they'll just go on and howl, or they'll be very nervous. I have a little dog now that never barks or makes a noise, but boy, she gets nervous. And you know something's going on. What's going on? What are you hearing? Blah, blah, blah. And they are quite the portender of an earthquake or other events, but certainly they get quite perturbed when you and I, as humans, like, what is the cause of this? Don't understand it. And then suddenly it happens. Where I live now in the South, in the Mid-South, it's tornadoes. And dogs, cats, they react, they hear that tornado coming way far off long before we do. So it's that kind of thing. He's pointing to these natures of beasts and people, right? So Nichiren continues. In the time of King Ping of the Chao dynasty, persons appeared who let their hair hang down and went about naked. A court official named Xin Yu divined on the basis of this and said, quote, "Within 100 years, this dynasty will come to an end," just observing the conditions of the people. In the time of King Yu of Chao, the mountains and rivers collapsed and were destroyed, and the earth shook. A courtier named Po Yang, observing this, said, quote, "Within 12 years of our great ruler will be met with a dire happening," end quote. Now, the great earthquake and the huge comet that have appeared are calamities brought about by heaven, or the heavens, if you will, which is enraged because the ruler of our country hates Nichiren and sides with the Zen, Nembutsu, and True Word monks who preach doctrines that will destroy the nation. Question: how can I believe that? Answer: the Sovereign King's Sutra says, quote, "Because negative influence people are respected and favored, and good people are subjected to punishment, the stars and constellations, along with the winds and rains, all fail to move in their proper seasons," end quote. And again, this is flowery language, but we're all familiar with our environmental causes when we make, or effects when we make negative causes. It's not a mystical thing. It's the way it's said through these sayings and thousands-year-old stories may sound like we're getting magical, mystical. But what they're doing is, what he's doing is using these old stories as exemplars of a sense that we get in our experience, right? In this passage from the sutra, or if this passage from the sutra is correct, then there can be no doubt that negative influence people exist in this country, and that the ruler and his ministers put their trust in such people. Moreover, there can be no doubt that a wise person exists in this country, and the ruler of the nation hates and treats him as an enemy. So he's talking about his own position here, right? The same sutra also says, quote, "The deities of the heavens of the 33 gods will all feel rage in their hearts, and strange and unusual shooting stars will fall to earth. 2 suns will come out at the same time. Marauders will appear from other regions, and the people of the country will meet with death and disorder." So no, not 2 actual suns will appear in the heavens. What he's saying is there'll be a great deal of confusion and this feeling amongst the populace of disorientation. And so this is all language trying to exemplify the experience of disorientation. Follow? Once again, I'll say it again. Buddhism is about mental processes, not actual physical reality. But using physical reality as giving a sense of that mental condition, right? Of confusion, of consternation, so on and so forth. He continues, already in this country we have had unusual disturbances in the heavens as well as strange occurrences on earth, and the men of a foreign country have come to attack us. Can there be any doubt that the 33 heavenly gods are angry? Right, so the situation is extremely unsettling, not only on an individual nature, but the entire country, right? The Benevolent King's Sutra states negative influence monks, hoping to gain fame and profit, in many cases appear before the ruler, the crown prince, or the other princes, and take it upon themselves to preach doctrines that lead to the violation of the Buddhist law and the destruction of the nation. The ruler, failing to perceive the truth of the situation, listens to and puts resolve in such doctrines, following the people, not the teaching. The same work also refers to a time when the sun and moon depart from their regular courses, when the seasons come in the wrong order, when a red sun or a black sun appears, when 2, 3, 4, or 5 suns appear at the same time, when the sun is eclipsed and loses its light, or when 1 or 2, 3 or 4 or 5 coronas appear around the sun. End quote. These passages mean that if negative influence monks fill the nation and deceive the ruler, the crown prince, and other princes, preaching doctrines that lead to the violation of the Buddhist law and the downfall of the nation, and if the ruler and the other officials allow themselves to be deceived by these monks and come to believe that such doctrines will in fact ensure the protection of the Buddhist law and the nation, and act accordingly, then the sun and the moon will behave strangely, and great winds, rains, and fires will make their appearance. Next will come internal disorder, relatives and kins turning against one another and bringing about armed revolt. Many allies and supporters of the ruler and other high officials will be struck down, and then invaders will come from other nations to attack them, until they are forced to commit suicide or captured alive or obliged to surrender. This will come about entirely because they heed doctrines that lead to the destruction of the Buddhist law and cause the downfall of the nation. It's happening in the world today. It's certainly happening in this country. The doctrines that are, the polluted doctrines that are leading the powers and the elite and the officials in this country are destroying this country from within. And this is where Nichiren is going with this. And so I'll just continue with what he's saying here. The Protection Sutra says, the teachings preached by the thus come one Shakyamuni cannot be in the least bit harmed by the various devils of heaven, or by the non-Buddhists, or by negative influence men, or by seers who have attained the 5 transcendental powers, attained the 5 transcendental powers, and yet they can be so thoroughly destroyed by those negative influence monks who are monks in name and appearance only, that nothing whatsoever remains of them, of the teachings. In this respect, they are like Mount Sumeru. Though one might gather all the grass and wood from the major world systems, pile them up as fuel, and burn it for a long period of time, Mount Sumeru would not suffer the least degree of harm or injury. But when the conflagration that marks the end of the kalpa of decline breaks out and fire appears from within the mountain itself, then in an instant the whole mountain will be consumed by the flames, and not even ashes will remain. So this is the exemplar Nichiren is using to demonstrate how destructive these persons, these monks who have written their own commentaries and led people astray in Japan for the last 400 years into these other schools of thought. They haven't followed the strict scholarship of Buddhism, and they have, for their own reasons, as he said, for profit, popularity, whatever, They become politicians, in other words, and they are leading the nation, the people, the rulers, into a false sense of the Buddhist teachings, which isn't the Buddhist teachings at all. And so this destruction of integrity results in an effect. And the effect being these distortions of reality, these allowing a situation to build to the point of having invaders come into the country. It's personal, it's the ruler, it's the nation. Everything is in turmoil, right? And this, in fact, is happening in Japan. They can witness firsthand the famines, the earthquakes, the fires. They're dealing in a lot of civil unrest, civil wars, as well as attacks from the Mongols, right? So Nichiren has the benefit of being able to point to actual events, and he's making the equation of this equals that. This is already foretold in the Buddhist teachings that this is going to happen if you're distorting or moving away from the strict teachings of Buddhism. So he goes on. The Lotus-like Face Sutra says, quote, "The Buddha said to Ananda, it is like the case of a lion who has died. No creature that lives in the air, in the soil, in water, or on land will venture to eat the flesh of a dead lion." The lion is so feared that even dead, no other animal wants part of it, right? Only the worms that are born from the body of the lion itself will feed on the lion's flesh. It's a pretty powerful analogy. In the same way, Ananda, the Buddha's teachings cannot be destroyed by outside forces, but the negative influence monks who exist within the body of my teachings, they are the ones who will destroy these teachings, and the Buddha has labored over and worked to establish for a period of 3 great asamkhya kalpas. So these are the worst enemies of Buddhism, the ones that come from within Buddhism, but then derivate for their own personal gain. What do these passages from the sutras mean? In the past, the Buddha Kashyapa described to King Kiriki the latter day of the law of the thus come one Shakyamuni and revealed what sort of people would destroy Shakyamuni's teachings. Negative influence men might appear, such as King Mihirakula, who burned all the Buddhist halls and monasteries of India and murdered all the monks and nuns of its 16 major states. Or Emperor Wu Tsung of China, who destroyed more than 4,600 temples and pagodas in the 9 regions of China and forced 260,500 monks and nuns to return to lay life. But such men could not destroy the teachings preached by Shakyamuni Buddha. It is the monks themselves who wrap their bodies in the 3 robes permitted to them, hang a single begging bowl about their necks, store up in their minds the 80,000 teachings, and with their mouths recite the 12 divisions of the scriptures. They are the ones who will destroy the Buddhist teachings. It is like the case of Mount Sumeru, the Golden Mountain. Though one might gather all the grass and wood in the major world system, pile them up until they completely filled the heaven of the 4 heavenly kings, as well as the others of the 6 heavens of the world of desire, and burn them for 1 year, 2 years, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 years, the mountain would not suffer the slightest injury. But when the time comes for the great fire that ends the kalpa of decline, a tiny flame no bigger than a bean will break out at the base of the mountain, and not only will Mount Sumeru be consumed, but the entire major world system will likewise be destroyed. So that points to a period of tremendous mental confusion and distress. He continues, if the Buddhist predictions are to be believed, then it would appear that the Buddhist monks of the 10 schools or the 8 schools of our country will be the ones to burn up the mountain Sumeru of the Buddha's teachings. The monks of the Hinayana schools of the Dharma analysis, treasury, establishment of truth, and precepts will be the flames of anger that burn with jealous hatred of the Mahayana schools. And monks such as Shan Wu Wei of the True Word School, San Xie of the Zen School, and Shan Tao of the Pure Land School are the worms that are born from the body of the lion, that is, the Buddha's teachings. The great teacher Dengyo, in his writings, described the eminent scholars of the 3 treatises, Dharma Characteristics, Flower Garland, and other schools of Japanese Buddhism as 6 kinds of worms. I, Nichiren, would dub the founders of the True Word, Zen, and Pure Land schools the 3 kinds of worms, and Chikaku, Anen, and Eshin of the Tendai school the 3 worms who devoured the lion body of the Lotus Sutra and the great teacher Dengyo. So, it's interesting the way he's using the teachings to demonstrate the situation at that time in Japan. Sorry, checking my time. So long as Nichiren, who is working to expose the root of these great slanders against the correct teaching, is treated with animosity, the heavenly deities will withhold their light, the gods of the earth will be angered, and disturbances and calamities will appear in great number. You must understand that because I speak concerning the most important matter in the entire land of Jambudvipa, my words are accompanied by portents of the first magnitude. How tragic, how pitiful, that all the people of Japan should fall into the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering. But how fortunate, how joyous to think that with this unworthy body I have received in my heart the seeds of Buddhahood. Just see how it will be when tens of thousands of armed ships from the great kingdom of the Mongols comes over the sea to attack Japan. Everyone from the ruler on down to the multitudes of common people will turn their backs on all the Buddhist temples and all the shrines of the gods and will raise their voices in chorus crying Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. They will press their palms together and say, Monk Nichiren, save us. That's a pretty strong visual. In India, King Mihirakula was obliged to press his palms together in submission before King Baladitya. And in Japan, Taira no Munemori was forced to pay reverence to Kajiwara Kagetoki. This is in accord with the principle that men of great arrogance should end by bowing before their enemies. Those vicious and arrogant monks described in the Lotus Sutra in the beginning armed themselves with sticks and staves and used them to belabor Bodhisattva never disparaging. But later they pressed their palms together and repented for their error. Devadatta inflicted an injury on Shakyamuni Buddha that drew blood. But when he was on his deathbed, he cried out, Namu. If only he had been able to cry, Namu Buddha, devotion to the Buddha, he would have been spared the fate of falling into hell. But so grave were the deeds he had committed that he could only utter the word Namu and could not pronounce the word Buddha before he died. And soon the eminent monks of Japan will no doubt be trying to cry out Namu Nichiren Shonin, devotion to the sage Nichiren. But most likely they will only have time enough to utter the word Namu. How pitiful, how pitiful. In the secular texts, it says, a sage is one who fully understands those things that have not yet made their appearance. And in Buddhist texts, it says, "A sage is one who knows the three existences of life, past, present, and future. 3 times now I have gained distinction by having such knowledge. The first time was the first year of the Buno era, 1260, cyclical sign Kano Soru, of the 16th day of the 7th month, when I presented my on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land to his lordship, the lay monk of Saimyoji, by way of the lay monk Yadoya Mitsunori. At that time I said to the lay monk Yadoya, please advise his lordship that devotion to the Zen school and Nembutsu school should be abandoned. If this advice is not heeded, trouble will break out within the ruling clan, and the nation will be attacked by another country." Which happened. The second time was the 12th day of the 9th month of the 8th year of Buin-en era, 1271, at the hour of the monkey, 3 to 5 p.m., when I said to Heino Simon no Jo, quote, "Nichiren is the pillar and beam of Japan. Doing away with me is toppling the pillar of Japan. Immediately you will all face the calamity of revolt within one's own domain, or strife among yourselves, and also the calamity of invasion from foreign lands. Not only will the people of our nation be put to death by foreign invaders, but many of them will be taken prisoner. All the Nembutsu and Zen temples, such as Kechoji, Jufuku-ji, Gokuraku-ji, Daibutsu-den, and Koraku-ji, should be burned to the ground, and their monks taken to Yui Beach to have their heads cut off. If this is not done, then Japan is certain to be destroyed." Yikes. Anyone who says that Buddhist monks are pacifists doesn't know the history of Buddhism. Oh, man. He goes on, "The third time was the 8th day of the 4th month of the last year, the 11th year of the Bunei era, when I said to Simon Nojo, quote, even if it seems that because I was born in the ruler's domain I follow him in my actions, I will never follow him in my heart. There can be no doubt that the Nembutsu leads to the hell of incessant suffering, and that Zen school is the work of the heavenly devil, and the true word school in particular is a great plague to this nation of ours. The task of praying for victory over the Mongols should not be entrusted to the true word monks. If so grave a matter is entrusted to them, then the situation will only worsen rapidly, and our country will face destruction." Heino Simon Nojo, Yoritsuna, then asked, quote, "When do you think the Mongols will attack?" I replied, "The sacred scripture do not indicate the time, but the signs show that heaven is extremely angry. It would appear that the attack is imminent. It will probably occur before this year has ended." Yet it was not I, Nichiren, who made these 3 important pronouncements. Rather, it was in all cases the spirit of the thus come one Shakyamuni that had taken possession of my body, and having personally experienced this, I am beside myself with joy. So what he's talking about there is, again, the Buddhist teachings and the experience of Buddhahood. So Nichiren is saying he lives his life in Myoho Renge Kyo. And when he gets these epiphanies and remonstrates with the head monks or the rulers of the country, he does so not casually as just a rebellious monk. He does so because he's constantly studying and ameliorating and developing his teaching, as we teach ourselves, right? As I was saying earlier, the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha strictly followed and observed, and Nichiren's practice brings these epiphanies, these deep insights about what's happening in his world. And so when he remonstrates, what he's saying is, it's not because me, little Nichiren, is so vast. It's because I'm practicing correctly, and I'm merely reporting this, from this place of Buddhahood, this enlightenment, what is obvious to see. It's kind of like, I know this is kind of hard to get into this mindset, but I'll give you a really simple analogy. How many times have you heard, maybe you're a parent as well, have you heard a parent say, things like, don't run out into the street. And as a kid, you're like, my ball went out in the street. I want to get my ball, so I run after it. What's the problem? Well, because the parent can see clearly that the child doesn't see oncoming traffic. And sure enough, there are deaths every year from children who just mindlessly run out into the street and get hit by vehicles. Now the parent seems so incredibly wise, but it's only because they have enough life experience that they've developed this wisdom. And the difficulty here is to share this wisdom with somebody who's not capable yet of grasping it. Not all children grasp the severity of the matter of not running out into the street. Until they either experience it or see it for themselves, they can't claim to know or understand that experience. It's very similar in what Nichiren is dealing with as a profound scholar of Buddhist teaching. He is strictly following the teachings, and he is evolving his own teaching through that dedicated mind. And so he sees these things, he sees the behaviors, he sees what's happening to Japan, the populace, the rulers, their confusions, and he's simply identifying them. He's not some prophet master. This isn't magical. He's just a good observer. His observations, though, are free of pollution from politics, from ideologies, from manipulations for his own gain. Do you see? Those attachments are our delusions, and they make us blinded to the things that, when we're clear-minded, are obvious. I hope that helps you understand what's going on here. When there's a lot of flowery language and dates thrown around and what look like predictions, but when a mother says to her 6-year-old son, don't run out into the street, and enforces that rule, when the ball goes, you let the ball go, I'll get you another ball. She's not predicting that that kid is going to be killed by a car, but she is predicting that the situation begs for that to happen, and that the probability of it happening is going skyrocketing high if you don't listen to what I'm telling you. So again, when in Buddhism, Nichiren, Shakyamuni, all these bodhisattvas in the lineage tell you of, excuse me, I'm dry again. Buddhist leaders acting as parent, right? Parent, sovereign, teacher. That parent part it indicates the clarity of mind, the observational skill that is developed by practicing correctly. Myoho Renge Kyo. Right? So that's what all of this is about. Shall I go on? Yeah, we've got some time. Let's continue. This is the all-important doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life taught in the Lotus Sutra. What does the Lotus Sutra mean when it says, this reality, the true aspect of all phenomena, consists of the appearance, so, right? the 10 factors of life. You should look that up and study it for yourself. This reality consists of the appearance, so on and so forth. Appearance, the first of the 10 factors of life, is the most important of them all. This is why the Buddha appeared in the world. Wise men can perceive the cause of things, as snakes know the way of snakes. And when he says wise men, what is that reference to? It's Buddha wisdom. That's the wisdom that Buddhism talks about, not whether or not you're a great mathematician. That's all well and good. But when we talk about wise people in terms of Buddhism, we're talking about wise in the Buddha way, in the way to enlightenment. He continues, little streams come together to form the great ocean, and tiny particles of dust accumulate to form Mount Sumeru. When I, Nichiren, first took resolve in the Lotus Sutra, I was like a single drop of water or a single particle of dust in all the country of Japan. But later, when 2 people, 3 people, 10 people, and eventually 100, 1,000, 10,000, and 1,000,000 people come to recite the Lotus Sutra and transmit it to others, Bodhisattva practice, then they will form a Mount Sumeru of perfect enlightenment, an ocean of great nirvana. Seek no other path by which to attain Buddhahood. Question. At the time of your second pronouncement on the 12th day of the 9th month in the 8th year of the Bunei era, when you incurred the wrath of the authorities, how did you know that if harm was done to you, rebellion would break out and the country would also be attacked by armies from abroad? Answer. The 50th volume of the Great Collection Sutra states, there may perhaps be various kings of the Kshatriya class who act in a way contrary to the law, causing anguish to the voice-hearer disciples of the world-honored one. Perhaps they may curse and revile them, or beat and injure them with swords and staves, or deprive them of their robes and begging bowls and other things they need. Or perhaps they may restrain and persecute those who give alms to the disciples. If there should be those who do such things, then we will see to it that their enemies in foreign lands rise up suddenly of their own accord and march against them. And we will cause uprisings to break out within their states. We will bring about pestilence and famine, unseasonable winds and rains, and contention, wrangling, and slander. And we will make certain that those rulers do not last for long, but that their nations are brought to destruction. End quote. There are many passages such as this in the sutras, but I have chosen this one because it's particularly pertinent to the times and to my own position. In this passage, the beings who are speaking are all the deities of the threefold world, including Brahma, Chakra, the negative influence king of the sixth heaven, the gods of the sun and moon, the 4 heavenly kings, and all the dragons. These eminent beings appeared before the Buddha and took a vow, declaring that after the Buddha's passing, in the former, middle, and latter days of the law, if there should be monks of erroneous belief who complain to the ruler concerning one who practices the correct teaching, and if those who are close to the ruler or who are loyal to him should simply accept the word of these monks because of respect for them, and without inquiring into the truth of the matter, heap abuse and slander on this wise person, then they, the deities, would see to it that though there may have been no reason for such an occurrence, major revolt would suddenly break out within that country, and in time the nation would also be attacked by another country, so that both the ruler and his state would be destroyed. On the one hand, I'm delighted to think that my prophecies shall come true, yet on the other hand, it pains me deeply. I have not committed any fault in my present existence. I have all I have done is to try to repay the debt I owe to the country of my birth by endeavoring to save it from disaster. That my advice was not heeded was certainly a cause of great regret to me. Not only was it not heeded, but I was summoned before the authorities, and the scroll of the 5th volume of the Lotus Sutra was snatched from my breast of my robe, and I was harshly beaten with it. In the end, I was arrested and paraded through the streets of the city. At that time, I called out, "You gods of the sun and moon up in the sky, here is Nichiren meeting with this great persecution. If you are not ready to risk your lives to aid me, does this mean, then, that I am not the votary of the Lotus Sutra? If that is so, then I should correct my mistaken belief at once. If, on the other hand, Nichiren is the votary of the Lotus Sutra, then you should send some sign of that fact to this country at once. If you do not do so, then you, the gods of the sun and moon, and all the other deities will be no more than great liars who have deceived Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Devadatta was guilty of falsehood and deception, and Kokalika was a great liar. But you deities are guilty of telling lies that are 100,000, 10,000 million times greater." I had no sooner uttered these words than the nation was suddenly faced with internal revolt. Since the country has fallen into grave disorder, then, although I may be a mere common mortal of no social standing, so long as I uphold the Lotus Sutra, I deserve to be called the foremost great man in all of Japan at this time. And there was a lot of civil war going on in Japan at the time. Lasted a lot longer, too. Question: in the delusion that is arrogance, there are different types of arrogance, such as the 7 types, the 9 types, and the 8 types. They like to break things down into minutiae, don't they? But your arrogance is 100,000, 10,000 million times greater than the greatest degree of arrogance defined in the Buddhist teachings. The scholar Ganuprabha refused to bow before Bodhisattva Maitreya, and the great arrogant Brahmin made himself a dais supported by 4 legs representing the 4 sages, Mahashvara, Vishnu, and Narayana, along with Shakyamuni Buddha as a leg under his stool. Mahadeva, though only a common mortal, declared that he was an arhat, and the scholar Vimalamitra proclaimed himself foremost within all the 5 regions of India. These men were all guilty of faults that condemned them to the Avicii hell, or the hell of incessant suffering. How then do you dare to claim that you are the wisest man in the entire land of Jampadvipa? Will you not fall into hell like the others? What a frightful thing to do. Who do you think you are, Nichiren? Right? Answer. It's comical to me because Nichiren is the one answering or documenting these questions. But yeah, he makes these powerful statements, and he's a humble monk. But in the sphere of the teachings, he sees what's happening around him, and he knows his own dedication to the correct teachings. And he has a lot to point out that is an actual fact happening. So he's quite emboldened by it. But even as emboldened as he is, as this great teacher and a singular teacher in Japan at the time, not since 400 years earlier with Dengyo had this been achieved, he's receiving a lot of resistance from the powerful elite, right? So he has to declare that what he's saying isn't humble, but he himself is. So there's this kind of double path he's walking, right? So he's aware of it. He's aware that there are people who are just look at him like, man, you're a loudmouth. But he's right. So he's going to answer this. Have you really understood the meaning of the 7 types of arrogance, or the 9 types or the 8 types? The world-honored one of the Great Enlightenment declared, quote, I am the foremost throughout the threefold world. All the non-Buddhist leaders predicted that heaven would surely punish him immediately, or that the earth would open up and swallow him. But no such thing happened. The 300 or more monks of the 7 major temples of Nara asserted that the monk Saicho, the great teacher Dengyo, was an incarnation of Mahadeva, or of the iron-bellied Brahman. Nevertheless, heaven did not punish him, but on the contrary protected him in various ways, and the earth did not open up and swallow him, but remained as hard as a diamond. The great teacher Dengyo founded the temple on Mount Ye and became the eyes of all living beings. In the end, the monks of the 7 major temples acknowledged their fault and became his disciples, and the people of the various provinces throughout the country became his lay supporters. Thus, when someone who is superior declares that he is superior, it may sound like arrogance, but that person will in fact receive great benefits, because he is actually praising the law that he embraces. The great teacher Dengyo said, quote, the Tendai school, Lotus school, is superior to the other schools because of the sutra that it is founded on. Therefore, in declaring its superiority, it is not simply praising itself and disparaging others. The 7th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, just as among all the mountains, Mount Sumero is foremost, so this Lotus Sutra is likewise. Among all the sutras, it holds the highest place, end quote. The sutras that the Buddha preached earlier, such as the Flower, Garland, Wisdom, and Mahavarachana Sutras, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which he preached at the same time as the Lotus Sutra, and the Nirvana Sutra, which he was to preach later, altogether amounting to the 5,000 or 7,000 volumes, as well as the sutras of the land of India, the Dragon King's palace, the heaven of 4 heavenly kings, the heaven of the 33 gods, and the sun and moon, and those of all the worlds in the 10 directions, are lesser mountains, such as the dirt mountains, the black mountains, the small iron encircling mountains, or the great iron encircling mountains, in comparison to this Lotus Sutra that has been brought to Japan, for it's comparable to Mount Sumeru. He's going to go on here. But he's validating what I was saying earlier. I've lost my marker again. Sylvain. Silliness. Okay, so I've gone on a little long here. Hopefully you've been able to stick with me. It's quite an amazing letter, actually, covering a lot of subjects, mainly that if you really put scholarship and clarity first, beyond yourself, you will gain great insight, and it will serve you well in anything. Buddhism, math, science, gardening, farming, animal husbandry. If you follow the depths of teaching without manipulating them for personal gain, just using them, understanding them profoundly, then you are worthy of being called an expert, somebody who works within the boundaries of the known, and not just the boundaries, but the expression of the known. Things become obvious to you, and you are a humble vessel of these truths. But when you endeavor to put yourself in front of these truths, the human ego will always move things either subtly or violently toward their edification. And therein is the arrogance that Nichiren is talking about here. And it always, 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 always ends up destroying things. Destroying people, destroying sphere, even the teaching itself, right? Because if you're manipulating whatever teaching it is, let's pick something else like biology. If you've decided that biology is going to work for you, in your favor, to edify you, then there are decisions and disseminated information that you're going to put out that don't agree with the science, the biology, but they support you and your opinion. Then not only are you creating great harm for yourself and those who listen to you, but you're creating great harm for people who might be very adept at biology, but are held away from its study, and even will choose other fields of study because the manipulations that you've inculcated into the idea of biology have repelled people who could otherwise excel and don't even entertain participating in biology. So there's all kinds of harm that come from selfishness. This idea of supporting the ego. Use the idea of self to throw yourself deeply and committedly into fields of study, rather than forcing fields of study to support you, your ego about you and whatever you're studying. It's a very destructive position to put your mind in, and it affects everything around you, right? It always does. All right, so without babbling on any further, this is already really long. So thank you for being here. I remind you again of how much I appreciate your participation. Strengthen your practice. If you have ideas for tangential subjects within and around Buddhism, or how to apply Buddhism to something that you're experiencing, by all means, put it in the comments. That's what that section is there for. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Take care.